I've seen some mixed reactions in JJK when it comes to one of the most interesting concepts in the series, and that concept I'm referring to is the binding vow. We see a lot of them throughout the series, and they add an incredible amount of nuance, really setting fights apart in an already dense power system. The binding vow is this universal law in Jujutsu that no one in the series has ever dared even attempt at breaking. Except one, King of Curses that is, and due to a Hikari level gamble by the King Calamity himself, we never see the repercussions of what it means to break one. And today, internet, we're gonna figure out just what those repercussions could have been. Let's talk about it. Hello, internet, and welcome to my corner. I'm feeling fantastic today.
Going down. Dude, I'm playing Fortnite, dude. I got my pizza rolls already. I got a new girlfriend. Shit is amazing right now. I'm sitting on the gold.
And I hope each and every one of you is having just as good a day or night, whatever time you decide to watch this, that is. I appreciate you taking a break and chilling with me as we discuss one of my favorite things, Jujutsu Kaisen. I don't want to keep you guys in intro limbo forever, so consider liking the video if you did. Consider subscribing if you enjoy bullshitting with the bullshitter himself. Definitely comment though, or feel the wrath of my domain expansion. Comment what the name of it should be. Whoever drops the hardest name for it, I will spare from the sure hit effect and give you a shout out. With that being said, let's get on with the video. As dope as I think the binding vow is as a concept, I do recognize that it isn't a completely original thought, which isn't a bad thing whatsoever, because it kind of gives us a template for what it'd look like to break one. They're kind of this combination of karmic and alchemical laws that manifest in Jujutsu society. You know, it's very reminiscent of Nen contracts from Hunter x Hunter and focuses on this idea of equivalent exchange from Fullmetal Alchemist. We'll dive more into this later. So today, I think what's happening is we're gonna look through all the examples of binding vows in the series, or most of them at least, and kind of compare them to other series that borrows that same concept. And we're gonna see if we can come up with what a proper consequence would be for breaking them. What we do know in JJK is there are two different types of binding vows and different types of consequences, allegedly, depending on who they're made with. We know from Kenjaku, aka the Bill Gates insert in the series, that distinction matters. When a binding vow with yourself is broken, the worst that can happen is losing what you gained from it. But when a binding vow made with somebody else is broken, the consequences are unknown. For instance, Nanami is a great example and pretty straightforward one for a binding vow with yourself, since as the series goes on, they get a little more complicated. But for Nanami, basically, he limits his cursed energy output from 9 to 5. Obviously, that's his whole shtick as a businessman, so it's traditional working hours. And when he goes into overtime, after 5 p.m., his cursed energy output is multiplied, basically. So we've got a very clear idea there of what an equivalent exchange looks like in JJK with Nanami's curse technique. He's giving up power to gain power at a later time, and to potentially put himself at an advantage. And that kind of works hand in hand with another binding vow we see. Speaking of putting yourself at an advantage, one of the most clever ones early on in the series is a play on the shonen trope of like explaining your technique, because in JJK, when you reveal your technique to someone in a fight, it increases its output and lethality. They don't really go further into it than that. It's kind of just like, you know, the gimmick for explaining, but it serves a purpose here. You're putting yourself at a disadvantage by revealing information that is crucial to outcomes in JJK to increase its effectiveness. And the nuance there is that this is the most commonly known binding vow in the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, and you can lie about it, because the worst that can happen is nothing. You know, we see from Reggie Star when he's fighting Megami, he comments that all sorcerers are liars. And we've seen that with Todo, where he kind of tells this half-truth about his technique when fighting Mahito with Yuji to get the upper hand. And the worst thing that can happen here is that your technique's output just hits its basic effectiveness. But just like Hunter x Hunter, JJK really values that amount of information or lack thereof, or wrong information is even enough to turn the tide of a fight. Again, we see that with Reggie in the Megami fight, how he tricks him with his dog. And all that kind of mental warfare really turns fights in the series into this like amalgamous child of JoJo's and Hunter x Hunter references. And yes, sometimes it's straight hands, right? But there's a lot of head games that go into these fights that I think a lot of people don't really recognize. Again, a good example I think with the fights in the series is Megami. He's like the only sorcerer without hands, but wins every fight because his brain is just working overtime. It's like exhausting watching Megami fights because he literally is planning like a million steps ahead. And his ability to manipulate information during fights is just insane. It's just this insane buff that no one else in the series really comes close to, with the sole exception of Satoru Gojo, of course. So those are pretty straightforward examples of binding vows with yourself as the series goes on. I guess another quick one is Miwa, is the GOAT Miwa, when she puts her ability to wield a sword on the line to kind of strike Kenjaku and fucking misses. So, LOL, I guess. But as the series goes on, we see more complicated ones. And the most infamous binding vow that I think broke the internet is the binding vow with Sukuna's world cutting slash. This is still one with yourself, I guess, where the deal was he can use it this one time without a hand sign to catch Gojo off guard. But the caveat is, anytime after that, when he wants to use it, the requirements get exponentially more difficult and in a lot of ways completely eliminated the efficacy of it. And he does this just so he can beat Gojo. So now the requirements post the Gojo fight are as follows: Sukuna always needing hand signs for it, needing to chant to use it, also needing to physically target it with his hand. So it's almost impossible to get hit by this ability now because of all of its tells, unless you're completely stationary and can't do anything about it. But that's a pretty insane drawback to that binding vow. Him beating Gojo literally required his trump card, and in true karmic fashion, while he did beat the strongest, because of this binding vow, it also cost him the title of the strongest. So I feel like those are examples of binding vows with oneself and JJK that paint a pretty good picture of the give and take aspect of it. Some are literal drawbacks, some are metaphorical. So now I want to talk about the binding vows with others. There's a couple that are interesting when we first learn about the concept of binding vows between others. The first time we kind of see this is when we have Kenjaku telling Mahito not to break his promise with Mekamaru about restoring his body. And this is immediately a concerning scene because Kenjaku is one of the oldest sorcerers in the series, so he's seen it all. He's lived multiple lives in multiple bodies. There's allusions to him being in a big three kind of relationship at the time with Tengen as well, and he never even dared to break a binding vow with someone else. He doesn't even want to be near someone who's willing to break a binding vow because he doesn't know the consequences. So something that scares Kenjaku is something not to be fucked with. The new Shadow Style school, I think, is another good example. They use binding vows as a way to keep their techniques secret in their own clan, kind of as a way to gatekeep the simple domain and maintain their relevance, and to also steal the lifespan of their students, which is wild. And the simple domain is something that's infamous for not being able to be taught because of that stipulation. And that's something that's been around for 1,000 years in the series. So these are generations upon generations of sorcerers that are respecting this binding vow made with the clan. And these aren't like scrub sorcerers either. This started in the Heian era, which is known as the golden age of Jujutsu. So that's pretty indicative of the quality of sorcerers that are respecting this vow. And also the Culling Games is basically just like one big set of binding vows, and it really highlights the balancing act that Jujutsu as a power system kind of holds. You know, Kenjaku created the Culling Games, but he really only has so much say in it. And now we come to the binding vow that sparked this video. We have Sukuna's infamous deal he made with Yuji in the Cursed Womb arc, the Enchain Vow, which allowed Sukuna to take control of Yuji's body for 1 minute as long as he doesn't quote-unquote harm or kill anyone. So there's a couple layers here. This is the first instance of Sukuna using information to his advantage, especially Yuji's naivete in Jujutsu. And if you remember what I said earlier about information putting you at an advantage, this moment though specifically, it really is the precursor for how mental warfare is one of the most important tools in a sorcerer's kit. I believe this is the first time we see something like this when they actually get this pact being made. Sukuna was very specific with his language. He gave Yuji a very nonchalant version of the rules of it, really downplayed the consequences, and definitely did not depict the gravity of breaking a binding vow well at all. He knew how self-sacrificing Yuji was. He knew how little value he held onto himself as a person at that time, so that 1% chance where he thought that Yuji wouldn't include himself in that criteria of not harming someone, that was enough of a gamble for him to attempt to take Megumi's body. And it paid off. In the only attempt in the series to break a binding vow. And it's low-key why I love Sukuna's character so much. He really, truly is the king of calamities. And if there's a god casting judgment on him, he's down to fight that motherfucker and earn the title of the strongest, which he does. Dude wants all the smoke imaginable. I love JJK, bro. There's really not another series like it. It's swagged out. The fights are sick. The nuance is sick. It's a great series, bro. Sorry. So this is the one and only example of the series of someone attempting to break a binding vow with someone else. And we never see a repercussion for it. So now we're gonna pivot a little bit, lay some groundwork, if you will, for the next segment here. I'm gonna take a moment, give you guys a second to catch your breath, get some water or coffee or something. Consider liking the video if you did, consider subscribing if you know the drill, blah, blah, blah. I'm gonna take a sip. Ah, yes. So fucking good, man. Yes, I love coffee. All right, water break over. Transition, go. Binding vows borrow a ton from Hunter x Hunter, and there are so many more Nen contracts than binding vows. There's like literally one for everything, but some of the stipulations are insane. And there's not a ton where the consequences are super crazy, but there definitely are a few. And the ones that come to mind when thinking of Nen consequences are Kurapika, Aluka, and of course, Gon. I know Hunter x Hunter is dense, so don't worry, here's a pillow. Go ahead, bite into it if you need to. I'm gonna be real gentle here and ease you guys into this one. We're gonna start with Kurapika. Pretty straightforward, equivalent exchange theme going on with him. The way his powers work are essentially the most direct form of binding vows, in a straight up comparison to JJK. He can only use his judgment chains on Phantom Troop members, meaning he'll die if he uses it on someone who's not a Phantom Troop. And his judgment chain has the ability to completely incapacitate a Phantom Troop member. We've seen it with Uvogin, we've seen it with Crollo, we've seen it with, what's her name, with the gun, and that's a Nen restriction he put upon himself in the act of seeking vengeance. Togashi and Gege have very similar writing styles and have an incredible amount of respect for duality and karmic justice. So back to Kurapika, we're currently in this penultimate moment in his arc right now in the manga, where I think after meeting Sridnik, he's gonna have his own moment of whether he chooses to go north or south. And depending on his choice, we might see the consequences of his chain jail instead of just hearing about the stipulation. He might be forced to use it on Sridnik. And then we're really gonna see the consequences of that. Let me know if you want to see a video about Hunter x Hunter, because I fuck with Hunter x Hunter heavy. I love Yu Yu Hakusho, I love Hunter x Hunter, I think Togashi's the GOAT. But yeah, let me know if you want to see some Hunter x Hunter stuff. So for these next two examples, we have seen the repercussions of Nen contracts. And the most prominent example of equivalent exchange here in Hunter x Hunter is I think with Aluka's character, Aluka and Nanaka. She grants wishes, but she asks for favors in return. And based off the scale of the wish, the severity of the tasks increases. And if Aluka's conditions aren't met, then they get the smackdown. It's kind of like how people in Hollywood sacrifice their family members and sell their firstborns into sex trafficking so that way they can stay relevant in the eyes of other Satanists in this never-ending cycle of blackmail. It's low-key like the new Shadow style. Sorry, basically, if a wish is selfish enough, depending on the degree of it, she matches them with an equally difficult cost. So she takes a calamity, grants a wish, doubles it, and passes it on to the next hunter. Pretty straightforward, equivalent exchange, but the thing is, it's not Aluka, it's Nanaka's request. But they aren't necessarily all directed towards the person who wants the wish. It's random when she asks. And after 3 or 4 requests, I think, that's when the wish gets activated. I think one of the examples I remember is a butler asking to be a millionaire, and then she grants the wish. But then Aluka's requests came at a later time to another butler who refused to do anything she asked. And because that millionaire request was so incredibly selfish, Aluka asked the current butler for her liver, and when she refused, she asked for her spine, her brain, etc. Obviously, she refused all the requests, and because of that, not only was the butler who refused the request killed, but so was the initial one who asked for the money, along with 67 of the closest people to her, who were simultaneously slimed by Nanaka's power. The 67 people cost. I looked for some relevance into like the numerology there. I couldn't really find anything about that. So, you know, it's kind of this play on like closest to them, like emotionally, and I think physically is, I think, more so what that play is. I don't know how Togashi got to that number, but if anyone knows, leave a comment, because I'm definitely interested in it. But out of all the examples, I personally feel like this is probably the closest to a binding vow consequence made with others. You know, it's this play on the karmic world, but also this play on the idea that Megami shares, that the only thing that is fair in this world is how equally unfair it is to everybody. And we kind of see that with Gojo as well when he gets caught with that slash. That could happen to anyone. And it did. So the Alika theme here is something very heavily rooted in JJK, I think. I think Gege took a ton of inspiration from Togashi in that regard. I hope I explained that all right enough for you guys. It made sense to me, I think. I'm still working on my scripting craft here, so let me know what you guys think, because I do think that's a really important example for this subject. And lastly, we have Gon. Him and Kurapika are this idea of self-imposed contracts, and they really go hard on the equivalent exchange themes. And just like Kurapika, vengeance is blinding, and we see Gon as almost this precursor to Kurapika's decision here in the Succession War arc, where I think he's getting set up to go north where Gon chose to go south, and gave up on all his future potential and ability to use enough Nen that he sacrificed his body just to kill Pito. And in the Sukuna/Miwa level binding vow, Miwa can never use a sword again, Sukuna basically nullified his trump card, and Gon can never use Nen again and is essentially left in a catatonic state. His body is burnt to a crisp, literally from the flames of his potential leaving him. You know, he's quite literally burnt out. Someone who was praised for his potential the entire series was blinded by it and forced to commit the ultimate sin. Obviously, Alika fixed that with Killua, but even that cost him something. It cost him his friendship with Killua. So Gon has to start over from scratch. He's to relearn Nen and learn how to break his pattern of toxicity. And I think these themes are something that heavily inspired Gege. So the Hunter x Hunter connection, I think it's pretty clear as day, to be honest. I hope that made sense. We're gonna switch gears now, no pun intended, to none other than
Full Metal Alchemist. Full Metal Alchemist
is probably the best representation of what equivalent exchange looks like out of the three series, simply because it's so deeply rooted in science and alchemy, which is where the concepts come from, which states that all things derive from matter and they can't be created or destroyed, only repurposed. Basically, from my GED level understanding of chemistry and my master's in Full Metal Alchemist, it goes a step further with adding the human soul into the mix and states, and I quote, "Humankind cannot gain anything without first giving something in return. To obtain something of equal value must be lost." And we've got some really great examples of this. You know, there's a lot of metaphors and symbolism in Full Metal Alchemist that I love, and I think they're important when we're talking about consequence, because unlike Jujutsu Kaisen, in Full Metal Alchemist, we see so many consequences of people defying the laws of alchemy. Our protagonists in the first episode, Edward and Alphonse, they attempt their world's most taboo sin and try to bring their mom back from the dead. So right off the bat, we're introduced to this concept that the brothers eventually learn that there is no physical equivalent to a human soul. So what comes back is the amalgamation of their mother. And we see a couple times in the series what the cost of transmuting a soul looks like, and it's essentially dealer's choice. In this case, the depiction of truth as the gatekeeper, and however he decides to humble those who attempt this. So Alphonse lost his body, Edward lost his leg, and he kind of teaches Edward what the actual value of a soul is by having him travel with his brother's soul and no body attached. Izumi is another example for someone attempting this to transmute a soul and brings her child back from the dead. And in her case, she loses her uterus. She loses her ability to have children in trying to bring hers back. And what comes back, again, is an unrecognizable amalgamation. So we see this kind of karmic theme here. Mustang's a character that his loss and gain is a little more metaphoric, but the concept still applies heavily, I think. He's very much a Kurapika figure and a Gojo figure, I think, in their respective series. His whole character arc, he has a vision for the country, and he sees and acknowledges the atrocities, but decides to try to change things the right way. But when he's used as a sacrifice for the gatekeeper, he doesn't lose his life. He loses his literal sight. So we see all of these instances of characters, ironically so, karmically so, losing what they value most when they are in direct conflict with defying the natural law of things. So the concept here is pretty universal. Fullmetal Alchemist has the law of equivalent exchange, Hunter x Hunter has Nen contracts, and Jujutsu Kaisen has binding vows. And as we know, JJK is the only one where we don't see consequences from them. So after talking about all of this shit, and thank you for hearing me out and sticking with me on this one, I promise I'm about to bring this home. After all of these examples, the conclusion I can come to, and one that I am personally satisfied with when it comes to the consequences of binding vows, is that there are different consequences for different people. I think it depends on the context of the vow, and I think it depends on the person who broke it. I don't think the worst case scenario is death. I think in a series like JJK, the worst case scenario is change. I think it's the change of what you fear most, the change within yourself or others, or a change in ideals that you held close to your heart. I think that's the worst case scenario when breaking a binding vow, and I think that's very indicative of Gege's writing and inspirations. When Gon gives up his potential, he sacrifices his relationship with the best friend he's ever had. In the case of Edward from Fullmetal, his ideals changed. He gave up his identity for his brother back. And Fullmetal Alchemist has more of an optimistic look into it, definitely, but I think the cosmic irony is exactly the route that Gege would take with it, and I think he left it vague on purpose. So the most common theme here with these broken vows and contracts isn't necessarily death, it's change. And in JJK, I think one of the biggest culprits for what it means to change is something ingrained in the series' identity, and that's the heavy Buddhism inspirations behind it, of being stuck in the wheel of samsara. And I think that's strengthened a little bit because, as we know, Yuji's main rival for half of the series is Mahito, who is the embodiment of change. His whole thing is changing people physically, touching their souls, changing their genetic makeup. When Sukuna chanted in Chain, we were all expecting an immediate consequence. Even the King of Curses was expecting that when he ripped off Yuji's finger. But what if the consequence was not immediate? What if Sukuna's consequence for breaking his binding vow with Yuji was an investment? What if it was to simply reincarnate, this time as a vessel himself, to reincarnate as the thing he once deemed worthless? I think that would be the biggest karmic twist for Sukuna's consequence, to be stuck in an endless pattern, circulating the strongest, unable to change, unable to reach the heights he once reached, and to forever be cursed to lose to the strongest. I think Gege is more clever than to just make someone die if they break a binding vow. You know, I think a more poetic consequence is a truly humbling force. Because like we said, matter can't be created or destroyed, only repurposed. And what better way to represent that than to spin the wheel again? That's all for me, internet, for today at least, unless you're watching another video of mine after this one, which I appreciate, and I fuck with you heavy if you do that. Let me know if you did or are going to. I'm genuinely having a blast with JJK, so please let me know if you guys are enjoying this type of content. Let me know some other topics as well you'd want me to tackle if that's the case. Consider liking the video if you did. Consider subscribing if you want to respect the laws of our binding vow between content creator and viewer. I hardly know her. Definitely comment, folks. Love you all. Please be safe out there. Have a wonderful day or night, internet. I am going ghostly. Peace out, son.